All right, guys, one of the worst things that's happened in the world of fragrances as of late is the complete and utter destruction of my favorite designer fragrance for men, Dior Homme Parfum. The new version, the 2025 edition, smells nothing like the 2014 or the latest version, the 2020. It's disappointing. It's sad we don't have that. But you know what? I think the only places you can get Dior Homme Parfum now, the original, are probably at duty frees and airports, and then stock will be completely gone. But if you're not traveling, I've got a great collection of alternatives for you that I find to be very close to my favorite fragrance of all time, Dior Homme Parfum. If you want to find out what they are, then please stay tuned. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'm Sebastian talking to you about alternatives to my favorite fragrance of all time, Dior Homme Parfum. Whether it's the 2014 version or the 2020 version, I loved both of those, and I absolutely thought it was the best fragrance ever made, whether it's in the designer world or the niche world. I always considered that my top favorite fragrance, and actually later on, the more I started wearing it, the more it became my favorite fragrance of all time. But the new version is a sad, sad version of the original. And to me, it doesn't smell like the original fragrance. It's a different take. It's a completely different formula. Sure, they're probably using similar notes, but it doesn't have that magical touch that the original did. It's a very common smelling men's designer fragrance now. So I've done quite a few videos on that fragrance. You can search the channel to find out more information about Dior Homme Parfum 2025. This video is specifically about alternatives, and I'm going to do the video in a way that I find the fragrances I'm going to speak to you about first closer to smelling like Dior Homme Parfum, and the ones that are later on in the video are somewhat similar ideas or might come close to smelling like Dior Homme Parfum 2020 or 2014, but they're not identical. And I'm not saying these are clones or identical. I find them to be very similar to Dior Homme Parfum 2020 or 2014. All right, we'll talk about the first fragrance, which is a cheapie. This is a fragrance from a house called FOMO, and this fragrance brand is sold at Fragrance Buy. I've got it linked in the info box. This is Gary's Den. So a lot of folks mentioned to me Gary's Den is very similar to Dior Homme Parfum, the original, not the 2025. While I have it here, I've worn it a couple times, and I do find it similar to Dior Homme Parfum, the 2020 or 2025. I actually find it even more closer to BOADICEA the Victorious's Harmonious. There are differences, and yes, it does remind me of Dior Homme Parfum. It's very, very close. But to me, Harmonious reminded me of Dior Homme Parfum, but it wasn't identical. And I find Gary's Den to be closer to Harmonious than Dior Homme Parfum. Does that make sense? So you might smell it to be identical to Dior Homme Parfum, but I find it to be more similar to Harmonious, where Harmonious reminds me of Dior Homme Parfum, so this one does as well. So FOMO's Gary's Den is featuring notes of iris, amber, labdanum, lavender, cardamom, coriander, patchouli, vanilla, bergamot, cedarwood, vetiver, and musk. In the end, you have an overdose of iris, but what's different with Gary's Den in comparison to Harmonious and the Dior Homme Parfums, I find that this has a lot more stickier ambery experience and a little less than iris. The smell is similar. It's also not as thick as Dior Homme Parfum. It doesn't have that powdery, dusty thickness, but it has more of a gooey consistency, more ambery and resinous, along with the iris. So they're similar. There's similar qualities about them. They will remind you of one another. But I think the difference comes with the wearing experience in comparison to Dior Homme Parfum and even BOADICEA the Victorious's Harmonious. I'm wondering if the folks that created Gary's Den are the same folks that created Harmonious. I don't know. I don't know who or what company FOMO uses to create perfumes, but I find Gary's Den very similar to Harmonious. Let's go ahead and quickly smell it, and let me know if you've already sampled Gary's Den. What are your thoughts? I do enjoy this one. In fact, I think this is my favorite FOMO fragrance. It's created in a way that it for sure reminds me of Dior Homme Parfum. But like I said, there is that whole sticky ambery experience that I'm getting from this. And also, I don't find the materials to be as luxurious as Harmonious, but it's passable. It's for sure passable. And if you're on a budget and you're looking for an alternative to Dior Homme Parfum or even Harmonious, I think Gary's Den will for sure satisfy because it's pretty inexpensive. But here I'm smelling the amber and the iris together. It's a nice mixture. And what's happening, as I said, I'm getting more of an ambery resinous experience, which cuts down the powderiness of the iris. And I don't get much of a makeup-y effect with Gary's Den, whereas I do get it with Harmonious and Dior Homme Parfum. But it's more like an ambery take on Dior Homme Parfum, which is not a bad thing at all. It's totally passable and really, really enjoyable. If you love this DNA, you're going to really enjoy Gary's Den, especially for the price point, because I think it's such a great fragrance and a great alternative for something like Dior Homme Parfum happening to be my favorite fragrance, and you can get it for really inexpensively. But if you're the type of person that likes something a lot more luxurious, then for sure Harmonious is going to satisfy. I discovered Harmonious in 22 in the Selfridges. It was an exclusive fragrance to Selfridges, and it was an instant buy. And it was probably my very first BOADICEA the Victorious perfume purchase, because I felt like it was a great take on the original Dior Homme Parfum. And I do get a makeup-y vibe here. The Dior Homme Parfum DNA is known for the lipsticky makeup-y vibe, and it's definitely prominent here. And in fact, I get more of a makeup vibe rather than the lipstick leather vibe here with the Harmonious in comparison to the Dior Homme Parfum. Harmonious is very, very luxurious. It's also uber musky because it features notes of Ambrette. Ambrette is a musky note, along with Orris, leather, musks, vanilla, sandalwood, rose, rum, cognac, cardamom, cashmere wood, cedar, patchouli, vetiver, suede, coriander, bergamot, and cinnamon. So this is the uber most luxurious version of an alternative for Dior Homme Parfum, the 2020 version or the 2014 version. It's, again, not identical to Dior Homme Parfum, but definitely the idea is there and totally passable. Now this, as I said, Harmonious reminds me more of Gary's Den in comparison to Gary's Den reminding me of, Dior Homme Parfum. So it's interesting. I'm wondering who the people behind the Gary's Den fragrance are, like the perfumers or the house that they went through to create Gary's Den. But again, as I said, if you're the type of person that buys luxurious fragrances, niche houses, and things like that, and you love Dior Homme Parfum and you're looking for something that will replace your empty bottle, I think Harmonious should satisfy. At the end, with the reminder of FOMO's Gary's Den between Harmonious, yes, I do get a more luxurious take on the same fragrance pretty much. Whereas Gary's Den, as I said, it's totally passable, it's quality, but you can notice the differences in the ingredients. Not as expensive when you compare Gary's Den to Harmonious. But the next fragrance that I also consider a great alternative to Dior Homme Parfum or even Dior Homme Intense is Hugo Boss's Magnetic Musk. This is so delicious, and once again, this was at the I've done a video on this, and I discovered it at the Dubai duty free. And I had not smelled the Hugo Boss collection fragrances before, and I smelled through them and everything was okay until I got to Magnetic Musk. It was like, wow, this is so good. This is very honeyed, but also has that Dior Homme Parfum, Dior Homme Intense DNA. It's almost like they've taken B from Zoologist Perfumes, married it with the DNA of Dior Homme Parfum, Dior Homme Intense, and created a fragrance. And that's what you get with Magnetic Musk. It's super delicious. Really fantastic. So if you haven't tried this, I highly recommend this, especially since it is more honeyed. It is sweeter, but also very powdery like Dior Homme Parfum is. And of course, you've got that kind of sort of lipsticky vibe. It's not as much here as it is with the previous fragrance Harmonious. And of course, as I mentioned, I don't get it as much with Gary's Den, but it reminds me of Harmonious still. But here, this is more similar to Dior Homme Parfum or Dior Homme Intense, but also reminds me of B by Zoologist Perfumes. Let me know if you've gotten your nose on this. I know that brand, not that brand, but that collection is not necessarily distributed here in the States. Some of the fragrances in that collection have ended up at discounters. Not that one though. I don't know why, but that fragrance is super, super sexy. It's a different take on the DNA that I really love, the Dior Homme Parfum DNA, with that whole overdose of honey and musk with the Dior Homme Intense or Dior Homme Parfum DNA. So there's a whole video on the channel of my thoughts on Harmonious and this next fragrance, BEGIM's Silk Road for Men. In fact, I discovered both of them on the same trip to the UK. I bought both of them. One at Selfridges, the Harmonious, which was exclusive there, and the BEGIM Silk Road for Men I bought from Javoy in Mayfair. This one to me is more like a Dior Homme Intense rather than the intensity of Dior Homme Parfum, but still that DNA reminds me of Dior Homme Parfum, and so I'm featuring it here. This is a fragrance created by Hamid Moradi Kashani, and I don't know if they were inspired by Dior Homme Intense, but I absolutely love that DNA, as I said, and I like having variations on that DNA in my collection so that I can pull for something a little similar to it, but a little different at the same time, and that's what this is. This has notes of cardamom, amber, sandalwood, cedar, cocoa, hazelnuts, musk, and leather. So this one doesn't get as uber leathery as Dior Homme Parfum does, but the combination is super intoxicating. It's a little nutty as well and very spicy, but all of the notes are really super delicious together. And even though they don't mention iris, I do get an irisy vibe here because, you know, Dior Homme Parfum and Dior Homme Intense are known for the iris. Even the lavender, they don't mention it. I definitely get it. It's probably not credited, whatever, but it's a super amazing take on my favorite DNA of all time, BEGIM Silk Road for Men. I don't know much about this brand. I know they're an Uzbeki brand, Uzbekistan. And I hadn't discovered this line at all until I was at Javoy Mayfair, and I sniffed through the whole entire collection until I got to this, and I was like, whoa, I gotta get this one. So that's what I did. BEGIM Silk Road for Men from the house of BEGIM. That is a great alternative to my favorite DNA of all time, Dior Homme Parfum. Next, going to the house of Narciso Rodriguez. It's For Him Bleu Noir Parfum. I recently ranked this as a 10 over 10 fragrance. I consider it is, and not only because it has that Dior Homme Parfum, Dior Homme Intense DNA, but it also is two DNAs wrapped into one kind of a thing. It kind of reminds me of the original DNA of the Narciso Rodriguez For Him series, the Bleu Noir series, I should say. The original For Him series is discontinued. But also, you've got the whole Dior Homme Parfum, Dior Homme Intense reminder. So I like it because it has two sides kind of a thing. You experience the original DNA, and then all of a sudden it develops into like an iris powder, lipsticky kind of a thing. So it's a great, great fragrance. It's woody, it's grassy, it's earthy, plus also powdery and musky, and a bit sweet and vanillic as well. Of course, you've got leather here too, but really, really wonderful fragrance created by Sonia Constant, who does create a lot of fragrances for the Narciso Rodriguez collection of fragrances. And so this, to me, the For Him Bleu Noir Parfum is the best in the collection. And if you're looking for an alternative to Dior Homme Parfum and you're not deciding on any of the other fragrances and you come across this somewhere at a discounter, definitely snatch it up because it's a great, great fragrance. So this is Narciso Rodriguez For Him Bleu Noir Parfum. Long name for that one. But the next fragrance, I have it in the original bottle. This is from the house of Guerlain. It's Iris TORREFIE. So Iris TORREFIE, to me, you know, the Dior Homme Parfum, Dior Homme Intense, or even the original Dior Homme DNA is all iris focused, not the Dior Homme 2020, which doesn't have any iris in it, by the way. I know it gets confusing, but this has an iris overdose with coffee. There's ambrette seeds, violet, vanilla, opopenine, which are balsamic notes. But to me, it reminds me of the DNA of Dior Homme Intense and Dior Homme Parfum combined. I don't know what it is, what they've done, but they put together notes. And I think it might be the ambrette seeds because there are ambrette seeds in the Dior Homme Intense, Dior Homme Parfum DNA as well. But not identical, but there are similarities here. You'll be reminded of the original. It comes in for sure. You'll get the hints and you'll be like, okay, yeah, that does remind me of Dior Homme Parfum, or maybe a little more of Dior Homme intense, and you'll be like, okay, yeah, that's a great DNA. I really like it. I like it here. I haven't tried it in the new bottles. Obviously, this is the older bottle. This launched during the pandemic, by the way. I think it was around 21 or even 20 when this launched, and I really enjoyed it. It was one of the better L'Art et La Métier collection fragrances. The only thing is, I thought this was discontinued, but I looked it up. It's still on the Guerlain website, so I don't know if that was a bad rumor or something or whatever, but you never know. If you're in the market, go check it out at the Guerlain boutique or the Guerlain section of a department store that sells the brand, and see if you like this DNA, and it'll excite you to buy a bottle. But either way, that's Guerlain's Iris TORREFIE or Eerie TORREFIE. That is a great alternative to Dior Homme Parfum, Dior Homme Intense. So the next three fragrances, I would say, are further distant away from reminding you of that really fantastic DNA that I love. But these will be great alternatives to that fragrance with some light reminders. Here we have from the house of Givenchy, Gentleman Givenchy EDP Reserve Privé. You can go with the original in EDP. You can go with this. I'm just highlighting this one because I think the whole fragrance line kind of reminds me of it. Not identical once again, but there's reminders of it because they do use irisy notes in these fragrances, and it is sweetened up with certain variation of notes. This one, it's a more boozy take on the fragrance. It has boozy notes, and also it has the vanillic notes and of course the iris and things like that. But it's not identical to the Dior Homme Parfum. So it's more like an alternative, a real alternative, rather than something that's very close, if that makes sense. Alternative basically means if you like this is an alternative for it. It might not be identical kind of a thing, and that's more like this. But along the way, it also has spices and things like that, but it's quite boozy. My only complaint with this one is that it didn't last on me. It doesn't last too long on me, but I actually really love the way it smells. It's a great men's designer fragrance that hints at Dior Homme Parfum, Dior Homme Intense. So that's Gentleman Givenchy, or Givenchy Gentleman Eau de Parfum Reserve Privé. Very freaking long name. These names are getting too long. This next one, unfortunately, the original version did remind me more of Dior Homme Intense, Dior Homme Parfum. This 2021 version doesn't as much. Even after testing it again, no, it doesn't. I wish I had an earlier bottle of this. I do not. Or maybe I do, and it's stored away, and I've forgotten. I have to dig up. But the Valentino Uomo Intense from 2021, after L'Oreal took over, they changed the formula. So even though there's iris and vanillic notes in this, I feel like the leathery woods are more amped up. So it kind of tones down the sweetness, and it makes for a more woody, leathery experience with an afterthought on the iris and the vanilla that's in here. But you might not like the iris DNA that I'm obsessed with. Or the Dior Homme Parfum DNA, and you want something a little different, woody leather take on that, and this might satisfy you. But sadly, when they reformulated it in 2021, they changed the smell a little bit. So that's Valentino Uomo Intense. Do let me know if you get very similar, DNA to the Dior Homme Parfum DNA that I rave about all the time. And the last fragrance I'm going to talk to you about is from the house of Penhaligon's. It's the Omniscient Mr. Thompson. So this is further away from reminding me of Dior Homme Parfum, Dior Homme Intense, but the idea is there. This also has a bit of a bready experience, like yeasty, doughy experience, which makes it for a little more interesting thing. I much prefer the Dior Homme Parfum DNA myself, the original. I love that. It's one of my favorite fragrances of all time. Here, it's a totally different take on it. Very lightly hinting at that fragrance, but going in a completely different direction. Is Orris here, pink pepper, sesame seeds, vanilla, and leather. And I think it's the sesame seeds that are in here mixed with the Orris leather that's giving me a bit of a doughy, yeasty, bready vibe. But it's delicious, guys. This is really delicious. The Omniscient Mr. Thompson, that is the last fragrance I'm talking about. And guys, again, I'm so sad that this fragrance has been discontinued. I guess I shouldn't say discontinued, redone, I don't know. This new version sucks. Absolutely sucks. If you can get the 2014 or 2020, please do. It's the best men's fragrance out there. At least to me, it is. Absolutely love it. I think it's the best. Smells fantastic. Super sexy. But if you can't find those two versions of that fragrance, there's all these alternatives you can try. Anyway, let me know your thoughts on these alternatives. Also, let me know if there's something else out there that you would consider a great alternative to the now changed up, discontinued original Dior Homme Parfum, either in 2014, this version, or 2020 in this version. Thanks so much for watching today's video. If you have any questions or comments, list below. Please like this video. Please share it. Follow me on Instagram and Facebook, and I'll be back with more videos very soon. Have a good one. Goodbye. So one more fragrance for you guys. This is just a bonus. I don't even know if this exists out there. So Zara Rain number 2 Bergamot and Leather Spritz. This was created by Joe Malone, and it features notes of iris, leather, bergamot, lavender, oud, and amber. Sure, it reminded me of Dior Homme Parfum, Dior Homme Intense. I really loved this. I went back to buy another. It was already out of stock, gone. But maybe somebody is selling stock or you come across it. Don't skip on it because it's super fantastic. When I got mine, it was completely destroyed in there because the way they shipped it, just loose running around. But the fragrance itself is really amazing, and it's a great alternative to the now changed up Dior Homme Parfum. And I would say this, the Zara and also the FOMO, have kind of similarities, not identical. As I said, the FOMO is more ambery, kind of resinous. That has more of a powdery effect. So it's got similarities to the powderiness of the discontinued Dior Homme Parfum. But as far as quality goes, they're both the same quality because, they are inexpensive fragrances and they're not using as expensive ingredients as some of the other fragrances are. So I feel like they're both similar quality and definitely will get the job done. Anyway, if you come across this Zara, pick it up. I don't know if you will, but just in case, I recommend it as a great alternative to my favorite fragrance of all time, Dior Homme Parfum. Anyway, guys, thanks so much for watching today. See you guys later. Bye-bye.